Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bear Down Ballers here on the Field of 68. I'm Ryan Wall, joined once again by Jordan Pollock. And Jordan, the Arizona Wildcats have fallen off a cliff. They moved to 18 and 9 after losing 96 to 95 to BYU this past Saturday. And Arizona now has lost one game in a row, but they've lost three of their last four games. And as we remember, they did that earlier in the season, but the last time they lost three out of four was back in December 14th. So this team had a great 2 month stretch, and it seems like the competition has caught up to them, and their winning ways are nowhere to be found right now. First, how are you doing? And then we'll get into the end of this game to start.
I'm doing well, man. Yesterday was a brutal day for me as just a fan, dude. That Wisconsin game, like they're up 17 in the second half, and Oregon came back, and then the way this BYU game ended. But let's get into it, man.
Yeah, so like I said, let's get straight into it. And I want to start from the end. And in particular, I want to start with 40 seconds left, and we're going to run down to the end of this game. 40 seconds left. Arizona was down by 40 points at that point. Caleb Love, who in this game, we'll get into his total performance and break that down further. But in this game, one of his best games as a Wildcat in Tucson, 27 points, 4 for 9 from three, almost 50% from the field. He was terrific in this game. He hit a big three to bring the deficit to 1 point with 40 seconds left. BYU missed a free throw, and then Love drives to the lane. It seemed like, and the fans and everybody thought he got fouled heading to the rim. They said the basket wasn't good, fouled before he made the basket. He shoots two free throws, which he made both of them. Let's stop there and get your take on that up until that point. What'd you think of that big three by Love? And what'd you think of that and one, that potential and one by him?
I thought the big three was a very like classic Caleb Love one. It was just like, okay, like transition, like try to get to the bucket. He passes it. He takes 2 steps back. He jacks up a late transition through. I was like, no, and then he made it, and then I was just like, okay, we're the Caleb Love game, I guess.
Yeah, that one was just yeah, it's like the no no yes, and that's kind of how that's the Caleb
Yep.
Love experience in a
Yep.
nutshell. Did personally, I thought that was an ad one while watching it in live game speed. When they slowed it down, he might have gotten fouled before, but to me, it's just too close to call that in that tight of a game. Did you think that was an ad one?
Yeah, I did, and it just puzzles me because I know on the call they're talking about like, yeah, that's clear by the rules, and I know the NBA they're like we were talking about before they're like super lax on it to where it's like once you get fouled, you get like an extra step or two to like either do whatever you were thinking about doing or try to do something. And I know that
Hmm.
just like they just want higher scoring games, so it makes sense. But me, I thought he got fouled on the pickup as he's going to the rim. And so, like, what is he doing? He's in the process of trying to shoot the ball at that point. So I did not understand how that's not a shooting foul. So I completely agreed with you. It was pretty head scratching to me.
Yeah, either way, I mean, those two possessions in a row, which were Arizona's last two offensive possessions, everyone gives Caleb Love a lot of slack, but that's why you get Caleb Love, and that's why you need a player of that caliber on offense because no one else on Arizona has the capability and has that in their bag to be able to hit a three and then a potential another 3 point play. So Caleb Love was excellent in this game, no fault of his own. We both agree on that one. That was to me one of two controversial calls, and let's get into the second controversial call and the biggest one of the game. We had Trey Townsend on defense, and he had a great defensive last possession, and it seemed like it was clean, but the referees gave or the referees rather called a foul in this last play of this game, and it was just really perplexing because it just didn't seem like he even touched Richie Saunders in this one. And yeah, it just seemed like not just all the Arizona fans in the arena, it seemed like social media in general was blowing up with how bad of a call this was. I think this was 100% a non-call. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I thought Tommy Lloyd put it the best. The dude is just moving his pivot foot, sticks a shoulder in the chest of Townsend, and then throws the ball up, and that constituted as a foul. And I know people have been talking about him. Tony Padilla. It just the amount of hate that this man has gotten. I agree with you. Like, it's definitely well deserved after a call like that. And one of the things that blows my mind is there's always three refs on the court. You got one on the baseline and then two on each sideline. And so that play is down in the low post. You have a ref on the baseline, and he didn't make that call. It was Tony Padilla, who's on the opposite, or not on the opposite, but on the same sideline,
Mhm.
has an extra 10 feet away of looking at the play than the baseline ref. So it's just a super peculiar place to like make a call like that. And I don't understand this. Even Tommy Lloyd was quoted afterward and saying this guy who called or this guy the guy who called it is one of the best refs. That blew my mind. That
Yeah,
blew my mind when he
yeah,
said that.
a
And it was funny.
100%.
I was like, I saw some because I know you apparently UCLA has a ton of beef with this guy. I'm curious the history of that, but they were like coming together with us. They're like, we hate him too, and I was just like, yeah, and it was just brutal. I know, like even one of my teammates from high school that I played with, he just graduated from BYU, and he posted about it, and I was texting him. Even he was like, yeah, well, and I'm
I
just like,
I it's crazy because I don't know. I just for whatever reason I felt how the game was going and giving being up by one and giving the ball back to BYU with a couple seconds left and over 10 seconds. I had a feeling because it's just Arizona as uh, they just haven't been that great defensively in some stretches, especially late in games this season. And as soon as the ball went into that post to Saunders, I just had a feeling he was gonna draw a foul, which, as we both agree now that we both think it wasn't a foul, but I knew that I just had a feeling they were gonna call that on Townsend. And as bad as Townsend's been this year in certain stretches, he only played 10 minutes in this game. He had a great defensive stop, not just on that possession, but he was really good on defense. I noticed throughout stretches of this game. I was really impressed with him, his effort, and just I mean his physicality that he played was excellent. And it's just crazy that call happens. And Jordan, another something that they brought up on the broadcast is all no one play makes one team win and makes another team lose. But this game was so neck and neck and was so close, and Arizona
yep,
shot the ball so good. One of their best shooting nights of the whole season. Over 50% from the field, over 40% from three, over 80% from the line. This was an incredible showing from this Arizona team on offense, especially. So it really felt that this game was neck and neck the whole way. And if any game, because I don't want to say that one singular play decides the game, but if any game was decided by a single play and call, it was this. What do you think
yeah,
about that?
yeah, I completely agree. And you talk about how great of an offensive night the Arizona had, but defensively, like outside of that possession, like I thought that was a great defensive possession from Townsend, but their shooting numbers were very identical. Like there wasn't any really major discrepancies in any single stat. So statistically, it was a very clean game from both teams, and I think that's probably the one major thing about this game was just like they didn't defend the three super well, and they let BYU get a lot of good clean looks, and the turnover battle I thought was probably the biggest thing statistically that stood out. Arizona was -5 in the turnover battle, 14-9 to BYU, And so I thought that was probably the biggest stat, but it was a great game. It was back and forth the entire game, and it really sucked to see it end on a, a basically a ref stepping in to decide a game. But again, it's the Big 12. You can't put yourself in a position to lose a game like that to begin with.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Both teams had five guys in double figures. Each had one player, 20 or more points. And yeah, the turnover battle was an issue, and I think it was especially a bigger issue in the first half. I noticed our Arizona, they had too many little sloppy mistakes, and it seemed to catch up to them. But yeah, the level of shot making in this game was just on a different level. It got off to such a quick pace and start, and these guys were just coming out gunning. I mean, from Saunders, it was kind of Saunders and Love who led the way, but everyone kind of got theirs. But getting back to Caleb Love a little bit, I want to get your take on him because, like I said, I labeled this the best game for Caleb Love as a Wildcat, and this was without a doubt his most efficient at Arizona.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and that's been the big red mark next to his name the entire time. He's a volume guy that is just very inefficient, and he needs tons of shots. And like we said last week, like we live in an analytics era, and so he doesn't look great on a lot of times because of that. But when you have a game like this, and he kind of needed to, because I think that was a big thing for me too. Is you mentioned five guys got into double figures, and we talked about him last year. Bradley offensively has done very little. Like he had 8 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists. I know he was tied for the most assists with Caleb Love and KJ Lewis, and I think if you're not going to be scoring at a super high level, like I want a little bit more assists from you. And so that I think Caleb had a great game, but almost like he kind of had to at that point with just I think the way Bradley's been playing lately on the offensive end.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, to be fair, everybody kind of thought that Bradley was some sort of huge upgrade over what Kylan Boswell brought you last year as the starter at the point guard position, and he just hasn't been. He started the year against, a little easier competition, to be fair. He started better on the offensive end, but yeah, it's really cooled off recently. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Arizona did have five guys in double figures, but I mean, still, like I've said, two of those guys only took five field goals and were efficient, but it's really just this was such an efficient night, but it's still the volume is just not up for everyone else not named Caleb Love, which is a little bit concerning. And also, when you have a great Caleb Love game like that, it's you're not going to lose many games, but also it's going to be tough to win games when you're giving up 96 points against the BYU team who coming into this game wasn't ranked. Maybe that'll change in the near future since they have a better record than Arizona at this point. But it just doesn't. It's something we talked about in the last episode about Arizona, and I didn't think Arizona has the has huge potential to beat teams in a high scoring matchup, and this one kind of proved that.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I think that's a really interesting point because this is really the only. I think it was the only second game that Arizona's lost under Tommy Lloyd when they've scored at least 90, and so it gets to a point of like, can can this team get stops when they need to? And I think, like we've said, it's hard to go back and look at every single close win they've had, but it's almost like they've had to mostly outlast and outscore teams rather than get clutch stops, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Like I said from the start, they lost their third game in the last four for the first time since mid-December, and they fought at 18-9. And this is the worst year of the 4 years that Tommy Lloyd has been here. And although Arizona was unranked. They win six in a row, and they seemed to be unstoppable at one point. And now they just kind of plateaued, and they seemed like they're the team that we saw a couple of months ago couldn't that couldn't get stops late in games, couldn't get big buckets when needed. What? So moving on before we get into their two games this week, how do you evaluate this Arizona team right now when you only have four games left before March Madness begins? And yeah, where do you think this team goes next?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of still a lot of confidence work that needs to happen with this team and just their ability to finish games. And I know we were talking about it like I think off the air, but like when you compare it, I think throughout the at least preseason when we saw that Kansas game at the end of the year and then Iowa State third to last, I think me and you, well, probably a majority of all Arizona fans were like, "Oh my gosh, this is brutal." And then kind of the road that Kansas has been on lately, it's like, okay, like this looks actually probably a lot different. And then when we beat Iowa State, and Iowa State's kind of they've taken the punches, but they've also certainly delivered them lately. To where I still feel like they're in a place where these aren't going to be easy games necessarily, but they still need to show up, and I think it's going to determine, I think, going into the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament, how if they can finish games well and how many times they can do it consistently, because that because that's the name of the game when it gets into March. A lot of it is the draw, and Arizona's not gotten lucky on the draw a lot lately. A lot of it's on the draw, and it's closing out games. And right now, things aren't looking hot in either of those departments for this team.
Yeah, for sure, without a doubt. And as much as you talk about opponents and you think about all that, before you get into those opponents, you got to focus on yourself.
Yep.
And you got to make sure your team is ready and has a game plan and established a kind of rapport within the group to be able to put on a good performance when needed. And this team just hasn't shown that they can do that. And you mentioned, yes, their upcoming schedule it did look better at the beginning of the year, but this Arizona team is back where I thought they were 2 months ago. They don't have the I, I don't really think they have it in them to confidently beat anyone at this point. Right now, I think this team is so kind of in their own head and I just don't see the confidence that I did a couple of weeks ago. And the seeding, Arizona, but they're by no means, a bubble team right now. We're not saying that, but they were projected as a two seed by many a couple of weeks ago. Now they dropped down to a four seed. I mean, you have four games left just in the regular season before you get into, the conference tournament before March. And if Arizona say they lose, say they go 2-2, say they lose three or four of their final four games, this Arizona team could be fighting for their lives come Big 12 tournament play.
Yeah, I still think they're probably a ways away from the bubble, and so I think a lot would have to happen, and so I don't think that's probably super likely, but like I said, a lot of it when it gets later is the draw, and for this team, I think to have a fighting chance, I think they're going to need to still continue to have a strong finish, and so a lot of it is like in their hands, but it's also there's a percentage of it that isn't because a lot of it's just the luck of the draw.
Yeah, I mean, because if you look at it, if this team finishes, right now they have 18 wins. If this team finishes with under 20 wins, it could get murky there. I'm not saying I'll state once again, I'm not predicting they're going to be a bubble team. I'm not predicting they're going to be near that, but it's like they could go from a four seed up to like a seven seed in the blink of an eye if they don't turn this on very quickly. And
Definitely,
then when you move up or you move down and you go to that kind of poor of a seed, then you're facing better competition right off the bat. So
definitely.
it doesn't do them any favors. And yeah, this team is. I was talking about this team having potential Sweet 16, Elite Eight hopes a couple weeks ago, and my ceiling has started to creep down and kind of get smaller here in the last week because this team just has shown that in tough environments on the road and against tough teams, they just cannot finish. And that's what you need to do when it matters, Jordan. But let's move on and let's talk about Arizona's upcoming games because they have two this week to try to get back on track a little bit. They started this Wednesday against the Utah Utes at 7 p.m. local time and 9 p.m. on the East Coast. It's on ESPN Plus. And Arizona faces a Utah team that is 15 and 12, ninth in the Big 12. And Arizona has beaten Utah 13 straight times, Jordan, at home at the McCall Center. The last time that Utah beat Arizona in Tucson was in 1986. So hopefully that streak doesn't come to an end this Wednesday. How do you see this game and what do you think about it?
Yeah. So basically, what you said is they haven't beaten Arizona and McHale since the pre Pac-12 days or at least for Utah for sure.
Yep.
Um, I, I think Utah has been streaky, and I think when I look at their schedule, a lot of it depends on whether they're playing up in Salt Lake City or whether they're playing on the road. They had a great win a little over a week ago against Kansas at home. Nobody really expected them to play super great in that game, but they did. Um, and I don't see this one going super well. They have a great. I think the program's all time leader in 3 pointers. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. Number 55 guard. He's having a really good year. A lot of their games seem like it depends whether they're on from 3 point or not. And I don't see that streak ending this week. I think Arizona gets the win by 9 points.
Yeah, so you were mentioning and talking about there Gabe Matson, the senior guard. He's had 23 points at least in three of his last four games. The guy has been on quite the run as of late, but you also had a good nugget there about Utah on the road, especially. They've lost their last four games away from home, so they haven't won a game on the road in quite some time here, and they face an Arizona team who, as we're mentioning, they're pretty much in desperate need to win a game here because if you fall to a Utah team who right now is a little over 500 and at the bottom of the Big 12, that just doesn't do you any good. But this Utah team, they're not a great scoring team, so I don't expect this to be a high scoring one. Utah only scores a little over 75 a game. They're only 33% from three, kind of similar to Arizona in that area. But I wouldn't say like I said, Arizona against anyone right now. It's hard to be very confident, but like I said, Arizona's had a ton of success against the Utes as of late, and Arizona is good needs to come out just with they need to come out with fire, in their bodies to get this thing back on track because after they play Utah, they play two top 25 teams in their last three games. But I agree with you. I think Arizona wins this one by 10 points. So we're both around the same number there. That game hopefully will be a big win. But this Saturday's game, March 1st at Iowa State, 7 p.m. local time, 9 p.m. on the East Coast, same as the game against Utah. But this one's on ESPN, a little bit of a national TV game. And Arizona, as we know, beat Iowa State a couple weeks ago in overtime by 11 points. That was the iconic Caleb Love
Mm-hmm.
full court, you know, buzzer beater to bring it to OT. Great moment, great overtime period for Arizona in that game. But Iowa State's coming off of a loss to Houston, but they put up a great fight again without their two best players, Keyshawn Gilbert, Curtis Jones were out. They're still unknown for the game against Arizona as it's still a little bit away here. But how do you see this game if I would assume that at least one or two of their top stars would play in this one, hopefully.
Yeah, I think Iowa State and Coach Otzelberger is in kind of a precarious situation. I know their sophomore forward Milan from Milwaukee. He's been just gotten healthy again, and that's been it. He was huge for them last year in his freshman year. Had a breakout year, and getting him back from injury, I think a lot of they're just kind of hoping to stay at least get momentum going to where he can get back. And they still looked great, I think, for a lot of the time that he's been out for. But now he's, like you said, with Gilbert and Jones have been hurt. They're in a precarious situation of they were wanting to get healthy at this time, and they still can't beat the injury bug. And they played a great game. I caught some of it on Saturday against Houston. Felt like they were in it for pretty much most of the entire game until the last minute, when Houston kind of just won in the free throw battle. But
Hmm.
I think this is going to be a really tough game for Arizona, and a high fan turnout that they've given their Cyclones and AMs. I think Arizona's going to drop one in this game. Um, and I think they'll probably lose within 2 to 3 possessions. I probably put it at 4 points.
Yeah, because when Arizona first played Iowa State a couple weeks back at McCall, it wasn't Curtis Jones who had a great game. He only had 8 in that one, but it was Tymon Lipsey, their
Mm-hmm.
third guard, who is also a really good veteran guard. He scored 18 points. Gilbert poured in 17, and Joshua Jefferson, their big man, had 15. So those were their top three scorers in that game. I do think this game, it's weird because like I said, we still are recording this on Sunday night, so it's about 6 days away from when they're gonna play, so it's still unknown who they're gonna have. But they showed a lot of fight on the this past Saturday against Houston. So I think if Arizona sees a I think even I agree. Even if if Lipsy or if Jones and Gilbert are out, I still think this game is going to be close because especially because it's at home
Mm-hmm.
and Gilbert was only out due to illness, so I would expect that he would at least be back, and he was the one who killed Arizona in that first game. And Arizona was only 43% from the field in this one. They really need to tighten that up, and they normally out rebound teams by a lot, but only out rebounded Iowa State by one. So if they can fix those things, I think they'll be closer. But I think we're on the same wavelength here until Arizona proves they can beat a top 10 team on the road, especially. I'm just not going to be behind them and back them and predict them to win. So I'm going to go with Iowa State, win by 5 points here. Wouldn't be shocked if Arizona pulled this one out, but if I think Iowa State will take this one, especially if they have their two-star guards back. But if Arizona goes 1-1 this week, their final week is Arizona State at home on Tuesday, March 4th, and they close it out at Kansas March 8th, the 23 ranked Jayhawks. But overall, Arizona does need to they really just need to show some life here because it seemed like as the fans after that game against BYU, the air was just let out of the sails, and in that fan base is just very disappointed. So, how confident are you that this team can bounce back here?
I, I'm probably on the optimistic side, and I think just because of especially how the game ended Saturday, to where it just at that point, like the way the game ended in the hands of Padilla, I'm on the optimistic side that they can probably turn it around. But I think it's gonna take the cast. I think Henry Vasar has dropped a little bit from where he has been playing, and I think that's probably one of the bigger things for me is how much he's been on the offensive glass, and just how much of a shot creator he's been for himself and his teammates. And I just don't feel like I've seen that a ton in a lot of these closer losses that they've had over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's the thing, as you said. All three of their losses in the last four games, they had a 3-point loss, a 4-point loss, and a 1-point loss. So they're not getting blown out by any means. That's not what I'm saying. Is what I'm saying is losing there, there's not a participation trophy just because you lose
That's
by 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, or 20 points. It's all the same. It's a loss. And when you stack those losses up, it continues to build and wear on a team. And it's not great when you have less than 5 games left of the season. That's all I'm saying. And to be a great team, you have to beat great teams and you have to win close games. And we'll see if Arizona has what it takes to bounce back for the second time because they already overcame earlier in the season a lot of trouble and difficulty. So we'll see if they can do it once more and get this thing back on track before the Big 12 tournament and before March Madness. But unfortunately, we're out of time for today. I'm Ryan Wall. He's Jordan Pollock. Thanks everybody for tuning in, for watching, viewing, liking, and subscribing. Follow the Field of 68. Follow Bear D